Hi, my name is John Parello. I'm a senior technical leader for Cisco Systems. I work in the enterprise networking group. Under that group, I'm in the core software group, and I write the software that goes on our switching platforms. And today I'm here to talk to you about Cisco Digital Ceiling. Cisco Digital Ceiling is an effort that we've been putting through to help with the IoT in the enterprise. IoT takes on a lot of different flavors. You can see IoT in industrial automation, IoT in your homes, but specifically what we're talking about is IoT in the enterprise. And a lot of times you see the phases of the journey. You could say that there are people, when you look at IoT, it goes through different phases. Convergences of the building and the enterprises, looking at once we have that convergence, we start to add intelligence onto that, and then we can get sort of into a third phase of it, which we're starting to call the digital ceiling. Why the ceiling, and why are we talking about the digital ceiling? Well, we started looking at the things in enterprises, and if you look up at the ceilings in buildings, most of the things in commercial buildings wind up in the ceiling. So it just made a natural evolution for us to start to look at the ceiling and say, you know, that's one of the few things that's going from analog to digital. If we could digitize the things in the ceiling in the enterprise could be a platform for sensors, for adding extra value and making your buildings smarter and more intelligent. So, one of these things that we started seeing is the convergence of things onto the Ethernet cable. When things go from from analog to digital, they wind up converging, and it winds up converging onto Ethernet networks. We've seen this with data. We started to see this with video, where things went from coax, and then they started going onto the Ethernet. We saw this in telephony. So this natural progression that you have seen, that where things were converging onto IP networks, we're starting to see into buildings. So right now, we're at the point where the things in the buildings can converge onto that, and that is enabled by two things. One, data that's going through that, and two, the fact that we can power these things now with Cisco UPoE with 60 watts. So what we're trying to do is to give a low voltage infrastructure into the ceiling so that Cisco can enable that for our partners and the ecosystems. So the digital ceiling is going to be a platform where we can put the things in a building, make them smarter, and then start to build on that. So one of the things that we started looking at is we're saying, what are the number of things in the ceiling when you see there? There's sensors, there's VAV valves, there's all different things in there. But the lights, every 8 feet in a building, there's a light. And if you take a look at the ceiling, the most numerous thing in your buildings winds up being the lighting fixtures. So it was natural for us to go after that. So the first step to creating the digital ceiling is to get the lights enabled. Now, we're able to do this because we came to a sweet spot where the amount of light that we could push out with LEDs became economically viable for us to put in our PoE infrastructure so that we could have enough energy for enough lights that's going to come out in the buildings. So what we do is we first digitize the ceilings by getting the light infrastructure in there, and then we use that to put in extra sensors and to start to build smart digital ceilings in there. Now, you might say, ooh, is this affordable? Would I be using Cisco switches and infrastructure in there? Yes, it is economically viable to put in an Ethernet infrastructure in your ceiling and then to put your LED lighting on top of that. And once you do, that enables you to have a digital ceiling, to have the ceiling as a platform for further analytics and further things that are going to go into your ceiling. And as I was saying, the lighting has transitioned to the point where we can get enough light for the amount of power that we could push through our infrastructure. And that gives us a low voltage infrastructure in the ceiling as opposed to directly back to a wiring closet. Now, if you want to take a look, once you have a digital ceiling, you have these things wired in there, we're going to start to say that we need an architecture for a platform for it. So what I'm showing here is that you naturally have endpoints at the bottom. You say, okay, all the endpoints in my ceiling and all my buildings, they're going to need some sort of a power supply. This is the generic architecture for this. They need a power supply. After that, they're going to need network communication. Once you have endpoints that are being powered, that have network communication, you're going to have a natural tendency to say, well, I'm going to have applications on top of that. And they fall into three categories. The BMS, and that's your typical FCAP management where you do faults, configuration, assets, performance, and security. You're going to do that for your building infrastructure. You're going to have the actual controls when you're in the buildings in those applications, and then you're going to have sustainability and energy. So this is a generic look at the architecture. Endpoints, your power supply, network communication, and then your value-added applications on top. So how is Cisco going to approach this? Well, we're going to enable partners to build the endpoints, to have the chipsets, to have PoE, to have controls built directly into the IoT devices that are going to the digital ceiling. On top of that, we're going to provide you the resilient platforms through a low voltage infrastructure or through our existing product lines to push out the power to power these devices over Ethernet. After that, we're going to need network communication protocols, layer 2 communications to connect them either via Wi-Fi or via wired. And then on top of that, the controls that you're going to need to build those applications, the IoT, the FCAPS, and the energy management. And we started looking at different protocols. It's a Tower of Babel of the different protocols out there. We're going to start first with CoAP because it's the most, and it's a very technical term, internet-y of all the other ones that we saw. CoAP, if you switch in your mind, you could say there's HTTP over TCP, and you get HTML documents. CoAP is the same get and post metaphor for HTTP, except it goes over UDP, and you're going to be pushing documents back and forth, which are going to be sensor markup language or JSON objects in there. So it's a similar type of thing, and we're hoping that that sort of explosion that we got from the internet from building those kind of applications can happen with your things in the enterprise. So once we have that, that enables us to put in a Cisco architecture where the digital ceiling falls into that generic architecture. The endpoints, the Cisco network to power it and give you a low voltage infrastructure and to give you the data, and then the applications and the added values on top. Now, one of the biggest things that people ask after that is, well, what about the security of this stuff? These things are going to be going into the occupied space. It's not going to be in your wiring closets. Some of these devices are going to be out into the common spaces. We've been looking at the security models. What we want to do at Cisco is to give you the low voltage infrastructure, give you the data and the information in there efficiently, and give you a secure platform that you could build this on top. And we've been looking at different levels of security so that we can certify these things, and you can have that through a Cisco validated design that we'll be working on. What we've done is we've enabled features on our current switching lines, and we're working on newer switching lines that'll be coming out in our low voltage infrastructure in the coming year. Some of the features that we're proud to announce on these things are enabling the digital ceiling. One of them is 2-event classification. That means that your devices can come up quickly and get power immediately. They don't have to go through a full discovery protocol and a full negotiation. Fast PoE, where if you actually physically reboot the box will come up faster, and we will give PoE out first. So you don't want your boxes, if they get a power supply failure or something like that, then we're going to turn around and we're going to say, hey, we're going to come up faster. Persistent PoE, that's a very cool feature where if your box reboots or you have to do a reboot of your box, you won't lose the power. The power to the endpoint devices will stay on even though we do a software reboot. There'll be a quick sub-second flicker, which is undetectable for the human eye for lighting, and you will see your devices will stay up. We're also adding a CoAP proxy, and I talked about the different protocols, and I talked about CoAP. The CoAP proxy is going to be embedded directly in the switch that allows the switches to be a natural aggregation point for your data. What I'm showing here is a list of the releases that we're coming out. We're first coming out with some of them in experimental releases, and we're coming out on the 2K and 3K lines on our next releases. So you can talk to your Cisco representative and get these experimentally, and you can also get them in the full production releases. And again, what we want to do is to keep a uniform, internet-y kind of way of doing things where you do a CoAP directly to a light or directly to a switch that is a natural aggregation point for all of the data on there. You're going to have a lot of things. It's the pets versus cattle metaphor. Okay? You're going to have a lot of cattle, and you're going to want to have them naturally aggregated to a point. We're hoping that the Cisco switching platform is a natural aggregation point where you can pull information out. And you can step up the different hierarchies within your network and use that as a platform. So at the edge, we'll be aggregating information via CoAP. At the distribution area where the routing platforms is, we're positioning our IOX platform where you can put applications in there to pull information out and put that into a cloud or a Cisco cloud provider, and then get analytics and information from our providers. Our CoAP protocol and proxy that we're putting in there is going to give you a natural file system metaphor, if you will, where if you've ever browsed a file system, you can take a look at a directory and see files. Your switches will act as a directory for the things that are connected to it, and then we'll have a hierarchy of those, and that natural hierarchy is your switching infrastructure. Now that enables you to have possible deployment scenarios where you can do these things as air-gapped networks, fully converged networks, or separate networks. It's up to your imagination on how you can do that, and these are different things that we can, different ways of deploying the network. What we will come out with, and what we're announcing with the connected, with the digital ceiling, is that we're going to come out with a partnership. A partnership for lighting vendors first, because that's the most numerous thing in the ceiling. Our building automation partners, our enablers, the people who are coming out with the chipsets that are going into the things, and then also our ISVs who are going to be adding the analytics and the things on there. And these are just some of the partners, and there'll be more coming out. So hopefully you've got a good introduction, a quick introduction to the Cisco digital ceiling. And if you need more information, just look for Cisco digital ceiling and start to take a look at your Cisco representatives. Thank you very much.